What's up, everybody? Nate here. Retirement. It's something that most millennials could only dream about for the longest time because 2 recessions and a global pandemic basically made many millennials to believe they were just going to work until they died. Sorry, didn't mean to get so dark there. But it's true. Many millennials have gone through life now expecting to work their entire lives instead of kind of walking off into the sunset and retiring like many other generations of the past have done. But why exactly are millennials kind of being cut out of retirement altogether? I mean, is it really all that avocado toast? Well, I started to look into this the other day, and yeah, millennials are a lot less likely to retire than past generations. And there are 2 major reasons why: savings and debt. Today, we're going to talk about both of those, and we're going to talk about why millennials are going to have a much harder time retiring in the future than past generations, and how hopefully millennials can fix this issue and then retire to Florida, as is tradition. But before I get into all of that, do me a quick favor and hit smash or destroy that thumbs up button below and ring that notification bell too. Both of those 2 things are completely free and they help to show me that you like this video and that you want to see even more just like it. Thank you so much for doing that, and now let's talk all about why millennials are behind on retirement and how they can fix it in 2022. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about here is savings. Saving money is really good in the short term, and it helps out a lot of millennials and Americans in general to get the things that we want. And while saving money has its purpose, it's not something that you should do forever. Because think about it, if something bad happens, like your car breaks down or your water heater starts to leak, then how are you going to fix it? That all costs money, and if you don't have the money in your bank account, then you're not going to be able to pay for that expense. The only thing that you can do at this point is to borrow money, whether it's from your parents or your friends or a financial institution like a bank. You now have to put that money on credit, or you have to take out a loan in order to help yourself out. This now puts you in debt, and while that might be okay for every once in a while, if many bad things happen to you all at once or something massive happens, well, now you're in debt that goes way over your head. So how exactly does this apply to millennials? Well, I can speak from personal experience here. I was a millennial and my parents told me every single day that I have to save money. Saving money and not spending your money is what makes you successful. I watched my parents save thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in a typical savings account. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with them saying this. I'm not the only person that went through this. Many parents all throughout the country told their kids, and especially my generation, that you need to save. And this all had the right intention. They didn't want us to go out and blow our money and not have any money to protect ourselves in the bank. And while the intention was right, this was definitely not what many millennials and Americans needed at the time. And if I think even further back, my grandparents and their grandparents, this is exactly what they did. Save money, and if you continue to save your entire life, then you'll have all of this money that you can spend on whatever you want, and eventually you can retire off of that. And this wasn't just some made-up financial thing that parents just decided one day. It actually made sense to save a long time ago. In the past, banks and other financial institutions like credit unions gave you a really good interest rate on your savings. You could save money, and the more money that you put in the bank, the more interest you would get, which means your money was actually making you a lot of money. This is why past generations weren't huge into investing, because there really wasn't a lot of need for it. In addition, jobs had pensions, so if you stayed at a job and worked hard, then you actually could retire by working one job and simply just saving your money. For a long time, from the 1940s to the 1990s, all of these banks and financial institutions were trying to attract people into their bank. When you put money in a bank account, that bank essentially takes that money and then loans it out to other people. If they don't have a lot of money in the bank as an institution, then they can't give out a lot of loans. They needed millions of Americans to put their money in the bank. One way they incentivized Americans to do that is to offer really high savings rates, but that didn't make much sense when everybody in the country started to put their money in a bank. You gotta think too, you had to convince a large amount of people in the United States to trust banks again after what happened during the Great Depression in the United States. Many Americans, when the stock market crashed, went to banks to try to get their money out, but banks ran out of money. So Americans started to stuff their money in mattresses, literally, and hiding it under their bed. Eventually, banks needed to correct that, so they made it very easy for people to put money in their banks and gave them a really high interest rate. And for a long time in the United States, inflation was low. Because in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and early 1970s, the United States was still on the gold standard. President Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard so the United States government could print as much money as they wanted to, and they weren't limited by how much gold they actually had in a vault somewhere. And obviously I'm oversimplifying that issue, but we're talking about savings here. So past generations told millennials that they needed to save money, but by the early 2000s, when millennials were really getting started, saving rates at banks were atrocious and low because everybody had money in the bank. Banks didn't need to incentivize people to use them anymore. That's just the thing that you did. But financial education wasn't really there like it is today, so millennials for a very long time saved money and saved money. But the problem is all of that money was losing value every single day due to inflation. I mean, inflation really isn't high every single year. The Federal Reserve considered healthy inflation to be around 1 to 3%. So if your money is making 4% every year, then you're beating inflation. Your money is gaining value. However, if you're only getting a 0.01% interest rate on your savings, then your money is losing 3% of its value every single year. So why exactly has savings become a problem over the last few years? Well, millennials have started to maximize their savings out of fear and based on the economic conditions of our country. Many millennials, even though most of them were told to save money, were still in a really tough position in order to do so. A lot of millennials were being kept down by student debt, and we'll get into that in just a second. So it was really hard for a lot of millennials to put money in the bank. And then the pandemic happened, which made it even more difficult because a lot of millennials were laid off or lost their jobs. This went on for a very long time, and you can probably imagine it created a lot of hardships for just about every American. But for millennials in particular, they had already faced so many different financial hardships so early on in their lives that now they were completely stuck. So when the United States federal government started to give out thousands of dollars in stimulus, well, a lot of millennials just pocketed this cash. They put it away in an emergency savings account because a lot of them did not have this before. And even beyond that, millennials don't want to feel what they felt back in 2020 and in 2021. No savings and nothing to protect themselves. So they've been starting to put a lot of money away. In fact, saving rates for millennials increased from around 7.5% all the way over 9% in just a few short years. Millennials in particular know the value of savings, and this is something that their parents had always echoed to them but never really stuck because of the financial conditions of our time. But now that a lot of millennials are highly educated and they're out in the field making money, a lot of them are starting to save, and they're saving big time. That savings though is not really translating to retirement in the future. So millennials are now stuck in a situation where they're saving a lot of money and being very frugal, but that's not going to translate to retirement. Now, the second thing that's causing millennials to basically skip retirement altogether is debt. More specifically, student loans. Again, there were two things that my parents told me growing up. You have to save everything that you can, and you have to go to school in order to be successful. If you don't get a college degree in this economy, then you're not going to get a high-paying job, and you're not going to be financially successful in life. An entire generation was told this, and an entire generation from 2000 to today has now spent thousands upon thousands of dollars going to school. The average student loan debt balance is around $38,000. And that's something that millennials can't exactly ignore. They have to start paying that off, or else the United States government is going to garnish their wages and they're going to have less money for everything else they want in our economy. What that means is millennials are now taking more and more portions of their paychecks and starting to allocate that to student loans in order to get out of debt. But I think there's a bigger issue in our economy right now. While millennials were told that they need to go to school in order to get a really high-paying job, and in a lot of cases that was true, that also a lot of times comes with the highest debt. I mean, think about it. If you go to school to be a doctor and you have to take out student loans in order to get that doctorate, well, then you're sometimes facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. That means even though you might become a doctor and you might start making 6 figures plus every single year. You're also going to have thousands of dollars every single month in student loan payments, which basically kind of sucks up the life of all of the additional money that you'd hope to have when you became a doctor. This is the reality for many millennials and Americans in general throughout our economy. In 2020, the average salary for a millennial was around $71,000, and the average amount of student loan debt is around $38,000. So millennials are spending more than half of what they make just on student loans. That is keeping them out of retirement. They're not able to put enough money away into investments because student loan debt is just sucking up all of their money. Of course, I think as time goes on, that student loan debt and going to college in general is going to become a thing of the past. I mean, obviously, if you want to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, then you have to go to school. You have to go through courses and then prove that you know everything about your field before you can do it professionally. That is not going away anytime soon, but for a lot of other degrees, like art degrees and marketing degrees, you might not necessarily have to go to school. A lot of the skills that you learn don't come in a classroom. The rise of YouTube and the internet in general has made it so anybody can learn whatever they want whenever they want to. And what's better is they can do it all for free. Not only that, but there's so many more jobs out there now. I mean, yeah, if you want to go into a traditional career, then it's going to be a little bit different for you to get a job. But there are so many different side hustles, and you can employ yourself by starting a business or making videos for YouTube. Now, what exactly does this mean for the millennial generation and our economy in general? Well, millennials are having a much harder time retiring today. A lot of millennials do invest. However, it's not the vast majority of them. A lot of millennials are stuck just saving their money. Savings alone will never make you wealthy, and it will never allow you to retire because every single dollar that you put away is losing value every day. Inflation for February 2022 was around 7.9%, an over 40-year high, which means something that costs you $1 today is going to cost you around $1.07 or $1.08 tomorrow. That's not a whole lot, but when we talk about everything going up by that same rate, well, now you've got a serious problem. You have to pay more for all of the same things. So if you think saving alone is going to take you into retirement because you're saving a lot today, well, 20, 30, and 40 years from now, what you think is a lot might not be a lot because of inflation. However, for millennials, student loans are not really something that's going to go away. President Joe Biden has pushed back the mandatory payments on student loans until at least August 2022. And lately in the United States, there has been a bigger push for the president and Congress to forgive all of the student loan debt that exists for Americans. But none of these bills and none of these proposals are even near to being passed. And the reason for that is because the United States government gets a ton of money from student loan payments. They're bringing in billions, if not trillions of dollars a year in revenue from student loan payments. If that was to go away, well, it'd be a great PR move, but eventually they're going to have to find some other way to make that money back. Now, we don't know what that could entail. It could be higher taxes. It could be the United States government just printing more money. Not really sure what the implications of that would be because nothing like this has ever been done in the past. And it's only a short-term solution because Gen Z and millennials still going to go to school and they're still going to start racking up that student loan debt. So it's just going to come right back and the problem is just going to restart. Over time though, fewer and fewer generations are going to go back to school. They're not going to go get that higher education degree because a lot of them just don't need it. I mean, to me, there is a big deal in going to school. I think that getting that higher education degree does offer you a lot of skills. Like for me in particular, I got a lot of skills out of college, even though I technically don't use my degree right now. It just kind of opens your mind up to different ways of thinking, but that all depends on what kind of degree you're going after. And of course, we're still gonna need doctors and engineers, so no, college is not going anywhere and student loan debt isn't going anywhere either. But what millennials can do is stop the saving. If you have thousands of dollars in the bank, like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and even $4,000, then you're pretty much good for a short-term emergency. You don't really need to save all that much. You need to make sure that you have an emergency savings fund, and around $2,000 to $3,000 in today's economy should be able to cover you for most emergencies. Beyond that, take a look at all of your debts, all of your debts that you pay every single month. What is that number? If, for instance, your bills all add up to $1,000 a month, and that's not counting some rotating bills like groceries, then now you need to create a long-term savings plan. And you want to play it very safe, then you'll need to save up to $12,000 for an entire year to protect yourself. If you're feeling a little bit more risky, then you can just save 6 months worth of expenses, which would be around $6,000. And obviously these numbers are going to be different for you, but basically you want to calculate all of your expenses that you have every single month and then multiply that by how many months you want to protect yourself by. Everything else should go towards spending and investing at that point, because once you start investing the rest, now your money is actually growing. You're protecting yourself from inflation and you're putting your money away for the future. A lot of millennials use 401k plans that are sponsored by their employer, and that is a great thing if your employer matches your contributions. But there's a lot of different taxes associated with 401k, so if your employer offers it, then that's a great thing and you definitely should be taking advantage of that. However, if they don't, then that's no excuse. You still have to invest on your own, and there are a ton of different resources on how to do that. But investing is the key. You gotta invest in order to beat inflation and actually put your money in a good financial situation for the future. Millennials have been through a lot over the past few decades, but I think with the right financial education, millennials can be the wealthiest generation of our nation's history. And historically, we are the most educated generation in American history. With that wealth and education, we can do a lot of great things for our society and make a lot of great strides in economic reform and social preparedness. But in order to do that, we're gonna have to continue to invest and continue learning. We can't exactly listen to what our grandparents said about how to manage your money. That system just doesn't work anymore for everyday Americans, especially millennials. So you gotta do what works today if you wanna have any sort of financial success. And doing these things now and starting to make these changes is going to take a while, but eventually retirement won't be a dream anymore. It will be a reality. But now I wanna hear from you on this issue. What do you think about the idea of millennials never actually reaching retirement in this economy? Do you think that no matter what millennials do, they will never reach retirement? Or do you think that with the right financial moves and education, any millennial out there can reach retirement and achieve all of their financial goals? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all of the top business and financial news from around the country, our team puts together a free daily newsletter, and you can subscribe to it by clicking the link in this corner right here. And if you want to stay up to date with me and everything else happening in the business and financial world, I'm putting out updates 7 days a week over here on this channel, and I've actually got another one ready for you right here, so be sure to check that out before you go. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.